Hey guys, it's Chris with the Great Party. Today I'm going to talk about a kind of prevalent illusion for people that consume a lot of internet content, and that illusion is that you are morally correct and intelligent, and that there's this other group of people out there that are either just crazy or opposing you, or sometimes there's a tinge of persecution based on what your identity is. And that's the most standard example of that is you see it in Democrats and Republicans here in 2023 America. Democrats see themselves as upholding decency and democracy and morality, and then they have Republicans that are attacking that, or trying to slide us back into the Stone Age. But then Republicans, see themselves as upholding this idea of what it means to be American, and then they have Democrats that are tearing that apart either through non-traditional values, or immigration, or whatever it is. But you even see that in independents. I'm a bit of an independent, even though I'm registered Democratic here in Philly, because that's what you need to do to be able to vote in impactful elections. The party's so powerful here. But as an independent, sometimes you kind of get sucked into the illusion that the party line people are the crazies, and then the independents are the only real people really thinking. So yeah, that's the kind of collective illusion. I think we're all sort of dealing with it in a certain way if we engage in a lot of online content. And I used to think that it was this entity that was enforcing this, and putting that vibe out there, this sort of divisive energy out there. But I think the explanation is a little more simple. So I talk all the time about how the internet, most of the content and the algorithms, they support the idea of you spending more time on the internet, because that's how the monetization comes in. The more time you spend on the internet, the more ad revenue comes to the content creators and the platforms. And it turns out that people really like engaging with content that makes them feel like they're right and that other people are wrong. It's kind of like a psychic massage almost. and and the internet is also really good at figuring out what your sort of identity is. Are you male, are you female, what are your political leanings? So based on that, these algorithms are just sort of coming together to just blast this content at you that reinforces that idea that you're right, everybody else is wrong. You're right, everybody else is wrong. So you end up just getting that sort of illusion. But it is an illusion, because it's a fact that any sort of moral viewpoint has its flaws, like any sort of political philosophy. You know, just take an extreme, even if you want to take the most extreme, liberal, tolerant viewpoint, which is that live and let live, anybody can do whatever they want. There's no judgment. There's flaws in that viewpoint, and the big flaw is that you don't have a coherent society anymore. You can't have your people come together and have a mutual sacrifice. Just look at how America was during COVID. Our society is so bent on individual liberty that you couldn't even get people to agree on wearing masks or taking a vaccine. Um, but the opposite sort of philosophy would be having this really strong national identity that's enforced, and that's obviously very flawed too. It's, you have to enforce that identity somehow. It's going to be kind of brutal, even if it's not brutal. It's not the kind of society where there'll be a lot of human flourishing. So that's just to say, like, yeah, whatever sort of like moral position or whatever philosophy you have, it's got some flaws. You got to just sort of be aware of that and not fall into this sort of trap of thinking that you've landed on the perfect like idea of what it like how humans should, how the body politic should interact. Um, so you're not right, but the good news is that the other people aren't crazy either, and they aren't bad. Like generally, a lot of the way this content works is it'll surface like the most ridiculous examples of like the other side. It'll it'll show you that like super crazy woke person that like sees everything like in terms of like oppression and whites versus black people, and that'll give you the idea that the other people are crazy, but it's just not representative of like what the mainstream of that movement represents. And this is it goes beyond like politics too. Like there's the whole like manosphere, which is just like it's a lot of men who are kind of like disillusioned with dating or like marriage, and you'll see a lot of content that's very critical of like women, like saying that they're shallow, um, like morally like lower than men, and it's a lot of it's stuff that guys that have had really tough times like in dating will just mainline to get like that kind of psychic massage. And the opposite exists too. Like my coworker was sharing this woman on TikTok, and she had like this awful relationship, abusive. I think the guy like tried to kill her or something. And she had a lot of like videos out just talking about how all men like suck, and like I didn't really get into it too much, obviously, because I don't want to be convinced of that, being a man myself. But it's the same kind of idea. It's just this idea that you and your tribe are like the morally perfect people, and that like everybody else sucks. So don't fall into it. Like if you there's this sort of like concept that hey, if someone's telling you exactly what you want to hear, you better be careful because they're trying to sell you something. And it I think the most useful thing, I think, to the way to sort of be in a democracy, like a self-government like we have like here in America or in the Western world, I think the most useful thing is to know what your philosophy is, what your political philosophy is, but always be sort of like interrogating it and asking the question like what unintended consequences does this have? What effect does this have on people that aren't necessarily like me? Like, do I have a blind spot? That's what's going to be useful. It's not going to be all that useful for you to just mainline a bunch of shit that like reinforces your own worldview. Feels good, but so does porn. But I don't think anybody looks at porn as like a useful thing. like, I don't think anybody that watches porn is like, man, I'm like really informed myself about sex or something. It's a terrible metaphor, but the point I'm trying to make is that if you're just like watching a bunch of slanted content that's convincing you that you and your tribe are right, you're not actually informing yourself, and you're not setting yourself up to be a great participant in democracy. That's about it for me. As always, keep it gray, and yeah, read some books, man. Instead of watching the slanted coverage, just read a book. All right, peace.